Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of our series Under Ytan. Today I'm here with Mary Alice Arthur. Warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
Welcome to Stockholm. As you can tell, we're doing this episode here with a foreign guest. It's the second time in our 10 episodes now that we have a non-Swedish guest here with us to have a chat about about life, or business life, if you will. In this series, as you know, we continue to explore the new world of business with thought leaders and entrepreneurs and business leaders in Sweden, but also across the world. And today we have really a nomad in the room. You're born in the US, lived 30 years in New Zealand, and now we've had the pleasure of seeing you around here in Scandinavia the last few years. Warm welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You're a story activist.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
What does a story activist do?
Well, I've had a love of story for a long time, and I really began to notice in my work in organizations how much the stories that people hold about organizations are actually working on the possibility that organizations hold. And a few years ago I heard an interview by a New Zealand actor, Cliff Curtis, who said anybody who works with storytelling is an activist. And there's something that perked up my ears. I went, yeah, I'm a story activist. I'm actually somebody who's really interested in how you use story to create positive systemic shift. How can stories help us to become who we want to be, help us to unleash our potential, help us to be a benefit to those people who work there in the world?
I see. Because when you hear the word activist, it doesn't always have a positive ring to it.
But I'm using activist as, because the core of activist is active.
Yeah.
Somebody who is willing to take some action on something.
Yeah.
And if you're going to take action, it should be positive action. That would be really great. That doesn't mean avoiding stuff that isn't working well, but as appreciative inquiry, a methodology which really has story at its base, often says how you decide to look at something, the words you use around something are a fateful choice. They indicate how you're going to move forward. And that which you pay attention to a lot is what manifests around you. So how can we use our stories to help us move forward? And there are lots of ways to do that in organizations.
Yeah, tell me, you've been a story activist, a nomad now for years. What are some of the most powerful stories you have encountered?
Well, it's interesting how story has started working in my life. So there's sometimes when I work in organizational structures and we're either trying to do one of two things, what I would call storytelling or story work.
Yeah.
So storytelling is, how do leaders tell the kind of story that can help their enterprise move forward and help people know how their work is part of the bigger vision of where the business is going? Mm-hmm. So there's some things that leaders need to know how to do. The where are we going story is a real key one.
Sure.
Because and that in OD terms is called line of sight. When I know how my work fits into the bigger picture, then I'm more motivated to do it. Often when I read organizational surveys, they say things like, I love my team, what do the rest of you do? Because somehow we've lost sight of how our work fits into the bigger vision. So on one level, the leader is a storyteller. It's somebody who needs to say, hey guys, it's over here, and let me tell you what it's going to be like when we get there. And let me tell you what it's going to be like on the way so that we can get there together. Mm-hmm. So a leader needs to know how to tell the where are we going story, and they also need to tell who am I, why should I follow you anyway? Who are you? And how do I work well with you? And what do you see are our possibilities and potentials? So there's a whole realm of storytelling that a leader in any part of an organization needs to be able to tell. But there's also the other side. If you look at kind of a yin-yang, there's the story we tell and there's the stories that exist inside the system. So no matter what's going on, people are making up a story about it. Because we do that as humans. That's the way we hold on to the sense and meaning in our minds, as we attach them to stories. So there are different stories happening in different parts of organizations, and all of those things together could be said to be the story of the organization. Not only what we all think about it, but what everybody around us thinks about it, and all of our customers and all of our suppliers. And so every organization is a composite of all the stories held about it. And the question is, are those positive, life-giving stories, or are they actually sucking the life out of an organization? So it's a fascinating thing to work with stories in structures, work with stories about structures, and then say, what stories outside of us could help us to really see ourselves in a way that could be generative.
Do we pay enough attention or invest enough efforts into our own stories and the stories of our organizations?
Well, I think at the moment you could say story is the new black. You know, we call everything storytellers, right? You know, so we call musicians, oh, they're great storytellers. Sometimes we say politicians are great storytellers. We say that novelists, wow, what a storyteller. So we apply this word kind of over everything. But in fact, all humans are storytellers. So the most powerful thing any of us can do for ourselves, I have a mate who works in Washington, D.C., which must be one of the places that has the most high-density storytelling and spin stories in the planet. And he says the most important real estate on the planet is right here between your ears. Your job is to figure out and be aware of what is coming in there and what is colonizing your space. Do you allow the story in or not? You know, so the more aware we can become that we are like fish in water, we swim in our stories, and they are the lens in which we see the world. So for each of us to become really aware, what is my story? What am I telling myself, and is that helpful? Or do I need to tell myself, do I need to figure out what that is I'm telling myself and change it? You know, how do I take back the power of my story? First of all, for us as individuals, and then for us as bigger groups and peoples. That's really interesting, and that for me is the work of story activism. Can we actually take back the power of our story and become aware? You know, the bottom line for me, we live in a narrative, and that means we can change it.
Sure. Do you have any examples of when you've actually seen how a person or an organization has discovered, if you will, or taken and become an activist of their own narrative and seen the effects of that has had on them?
Well, one interesting role I had once for 5 months straight, I did a full-time piece of work inside a telecommunications organization that was merging. So this was an organization that had bought another business and was putting it together with one of its own subsidiaries. So on one hand, everybody had something to gain and everybody had something to lose. Because frankly, a merger is not something anybody wants to do. Even the word sounds a bit painful. Because, so nobody I've ever spoken to has had an enjoyable time during a merger. It's just, but a lot of it's happening. A lot of businesses are coming together. So this particular organization decided it wanted for once to do a good merger. It had done a lot in the past. So, hey, this time we're going to try. So we used appreciative inquiry as part of the way the merger happened. And we actually had people from these two businesses tell stories to each other of when they had experienced a high point at work. When have I really gone, yeah, I was made for this work? And then we explored 3 topics that we decided were really fundamental to them being successful in moving forward as a new business. And this was actually a merger of equals. It wasn't they wanted to get rid of people. They wanted to keep everyone. They wanted to keep all of their business, and they wanted to become number 1 in the industry all at the same time. Wow. So we asked people to tell stories about when had they experienced passionate people who really cared about the work they did. And they discovered, hey, these guys are exactly as passionate as me. That's interesting. And then we had them tell stories about raving fans. When have we had customers who were so proud and pleased about what we did with them that they actually sold our business to other people? We didn't have to go out and market for ourselves. And then we also had them tell stories about irresistible leadership. So that is an interesting term in itself. It's not good leadership. It's not excellent leadership. You know, irresistible is really fascinating. And we said it doesn't have to be someone who is your boss. It could also be somebody you worked with on the same level as a peer, or it could be somebody who worked for you, because leadership can happen everywhere. And what I saw out of that was not only that people were really keen to come together, so there was excitement about what was going to happen. There was, ooh, we could be good together. But the concept of leadership shifted. I heard somebody say it in a summit we did of 200 people who were really working on the internal vision statement. This woman said, I thought that leadership was a title that you had on a business card, and now I realize I'm a leader too. So it shifted from being the leaders of the organization to a leaderful organization. And for me, that's a really dramatic shift.
That is dramatic.
And that's the power of really focusing on when have we experienced this kind of leadership, and it doesn't matter where it happened. So that's my That's my one good example.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Nice
I can see how that's going to transform the organization and bring a new sort of level of energy and engagement through everybody, that's for sure. It was interesting to have you here sort of as a visitor here in Sweden and Scandinavia. It's interesting from an external point of view or perspective, because I know you've been around the world doing this work. There's, I think, in the business world as such, there's sort of, we talk about this, some sort of tipping point or a new paradigm or a new narrative that is arriving, if you will, or emerging. So I guess it's two questions in one now, but so this field, do you see this? So what is your perspective on that? That's the first part, and then the other part is Sweden and Scandinavia. There's some traits that I think are pretty succinct about us, if I will. So that would be interesting to hear you explore some of that as well.
Ooh, the outsider perspective. What's Sweden really like? Right at the moment, and I think right around the world, people are noticing where it's like we've run out of the end of our narrative, and we're in that point before something else begins. And we talk about new narrative, but maybe the new narrative is also the new old narrative.
Sure.
I know in Denmark, I learned a few weeks ago that, I think it was about 10 years ago, the government really began pushing people about being individuals, because Denmark has a real history of commons and community and, you know, commonality, that kind of thing. And so, and it took a while to actually push that in, and then people took that on, and now they're realizing maybe that wasn't such a great idea, because, you know, when you're in it only for yourself, then it's possible to use everything myself, and as long as I have it, I don't have to care about it if they don't have it. So the whole idea of scarcity around the planet has grown. But as I was coming back from an event I was at about 2 weeks ago, I was really hearing Finland being right at the edge of the universal wage. I know Switzerland's been looking at it. I was in the train with some guys from the Netherlands who said the Netherlands is trialing that. So what would happen if the new narrative were about we take care of each other and there's enough? And that our work is about not only bringing our skills and talents forward, but also working on behalf of the whole and working on behalf of well-being. So that's what I love about the Swedish word for business, which is?
Näringslivet.
Yeah. So I had somebody write that down for me, since it's not something that I naturally speak. But I think if we look at that part of the language, what does that say about what business is all about? It's inherent in that word. It's about life. It's about nourishing life, which is a really fresh perspective when you look at how a lot of business has been seen over time, is about profit. And I think we're looking at almost like a whole range of what business could be, from the very, very hard, somewhat North American view of this quarter profit, and that's the only thing that matters, to how do we make sure that what we're doing is helping to support and nourish life long enough that we can keep going, that we don't use up everything just because we can. You know, what's the story? So I think we're in that crux point of what is that real story, and people are worried about it, and people are anxious about it, and people are talking about it, and maybe it's there and we're not seeing it yet. So I think all of those Occupy movements, for example, were actually a call for what is citizenship now. So I actually think there's that kind of story. What is business for? What is citizenship for? I had a book once that said, what are old people for? You know? So there was something in our society long ago that was very circular. You know, the old people looked after the very young people, and they needed each other. And we have kind of cut the edge. We've become a donut. The center has kind of died. But we could bring that back, and that's where I have some hope around a place like Scandinavia. So on the one hand, I think sometimes people are a bit too comfortable. It's going well here, you know, we're okay. So there is that concept of fortress Scandinavia. On the other hand, there's that question, could this society be mature enough to be helpful in the planet? Could this society be courageous enough not to be afraid of difference, but to begin to embrace something that could lead the way into something new? So that's what's attracting me to Europe right now. I have been holding that question, what if Europe decided to embody the story of peace and be a force for good on the planet? Because I think the European Union story at its heart is a story of peace. with a clothing of economic necessity on the top of it, which has gotten all the attention. But the kernel, when I read Jean Monnet's autobiography and I read at the core of what that's saying, I see the possibility of this part of the world being able to embrace the richness and possibility of diversity in a way that nowhere else can. And that makes me feel really hopeful. Yeah. It really does. That's what's been attracting me to keep coming back all the time. I see it here. So boy, would I like to work on that.
What is the story of Europe?
Yes. Well, Europe, the Greek word Europe, means the wide-seeing one. So in essence,
the
wide-seeing one.
Yeah.
So in essence, in that story where Zeus kind of ran off with Europe, he fell into her eyes. What happens when you fall in love with somebody who sees things totally differently, who sees a wider perspective? What if Europe could actually be that? So on one level, I think, if I look at it, maybe the spirit of Europe is calling me. Because I think there's a story to be found together that isn't quite there yet, but I have hope that it could come.
Interesting. Let's bring it back to Sweden for a while, because we had a small chat here before, and you mentioned one other company, AstraZeneca, I think it was, on the west coast in Gothenburg, Sweden. You visited a while back.
Yes.
I thought it was also, in a way, a beautiful narrative, if you will, also coming back to the design, the physical design.
Yeah, I think I was saying to you that what I felt was really wonderful about their campus was that they told me the hallways had been designed to be like the arteries of the human heart. They should let people flow around, and they should be wide enough that people could walk with each other and make decisions and discover things together in their walking, which is kind of like how blood flows around the human heart.
Sure.
And I found that to be a really, really beautiful idea. And I think that's what the world finds wonderful about Swedish design, is this attention to simplicity and beauty at the same time that is highly functional. And I think this word beauty is ignored but incredibly relevant. And it's something I learned out of the triple disaster in Japan. So when people were in the facilities looking after them after the triple disaster happened and all their homes were wiped away, they lived on 3 rice balls a day. That's not much. But somebody always brought flowers into those facilities, because in Japan the need for beauty and aesthetic is very high. Yeah. And I see that mirrored here too. And I think if we remember beauty, then we remember our humanness. So there's something really important about our stories, about nature, about access to nature, about remembering about beauty. And those things feel soft, but actually they make the resilience, they make the focus on what matters. They make business really live up to the name that it is in Swedish. So it's important.
Cool, I like that. Let's try to round things off. We have a small tradition at this small series to sort of gauge, look into the future a little bit. Let's give it 10 years. So in 2025, we sit there in this nice little cave or basement again, having this chat. Yeah. What kind of world, business world, the näringslivet, if you will, do you see, or what sort of world do we live in? What kind of story are people telling them?
Well, I think we have 2 ways we can go. Back when I was 17, I remember having a hit after watching the news one night. Oh my goodness, we're going to fall into this global disaster with the haves and the have-nots. So that's one possible storyline. Yeah. If we keep going the way we are, I think that might be part of the reality, which is a freaky and awful kind of thing. I don't really want to live in that story. But the other story is, what if we found each other? What if we turned toward each other? What if we realized our story was a medium for change, and that we decided we would take hold of it and we would determine what our future is together? I think together is the only way it's going to work out. In the work I do, we do a lot of intergenerational work, and I see that's incredibly important. Only young people, only older people, it's not enough. Unless we work together, we don't have the capacity that we could have. And it's the same with the diversity across everybody on the planet. We have enough, that's for sure. But we need to learn how to share it better.
Absolutely.
So what would happen if we decided to take hold of our story and, 10 years from now we were going, wow, we really shifted our story, and Europe is leading the world in how we live well together.
Yeah.
And we have enough. And every day is really exciting. Let's tell that story.
Yeah, that would be cool, wouldn't it?
Okay, I'll meet you here in 10 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a deal. Thanks a lot,
You're
Marilis, for having a chat with us. And thanks all of you, as always, for joining. Stay tuned. Exciting spring to come with many more awesome guests. So take care and see you soon.
Bye-bye.